Good Sunday morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining me here in the Weather Center again to provide you guys with some updated information on Tropical Storm Beryl. We haven't seen this system continue to organize as anticipated over the last 12 to 18 hours, but the latest satellite imagery, especially as the sun comes up today to greet us, are starting to show signs that the system is getting a bit more healthy and vertically stacked. Before we get started, please make sure you consider clicking that subscribe button, giving that like button a little nudge, and sharing this information, especially to our folks along the Texas Gulf coastline who will be seeing this impact within the next 8 to 12 hours. Beryl is going to be arriving tonight. We are getting close to closing time, zero barrier as we like to say on the channel, so all this information is going to be more or less nowcast criteria. We are done forecasting. If you've watched a lot of my live content up to this point, we have pretty much locked in our track and intensity forecast, and now we're just waiting to see how well it plays out, all right? So once again, please consider subscribing, liking that information, and sharing this information. Let's get started. So as always, we have to start out with the National Hurricane Center homepage, and currently, despite Tropical Storm Beryl here, latest information as of 4 o'clock this morning, we have about 60-mile-an-hour winds in the center of circulation, and we've actually filled just a little bit over the last 3 to 6 hours. According to National Hurricane Center, we went from approximately 993 millibars yesterday when I went to bed, and now we're up to 995. Now, I do anticipate we are going to see some strengthening, especially now that we're seeing some of that tropical convection really wrapping around the southern and southeast portions of the cyclone. I'll show you guys that here in a moment. And we're still moving northwest at approximately 12 miles an hour, so we're sniffing at that new steering current towards the north, that trough that's coming in and the weakness in our ridge that's been positioned over the southeast and the mid-Atlantic states that's more or less guiding it right up in between the Corpus Christi and Galveston area. Somewhere in between there is where we are definitely going to see landfall. Just how intense of a landfall we're going to explore throughout this video. Thankfully, however, if you look across the Atlantic Basin, though, for the next 7 days, I do have the next 7 days turned on despite it not showing anything, and that's the key takeaway here. It's not showing anything, guys. After we get Tropical Storm potential future Hurricane Beryl out of the picture, we are going on a bit of a tropical hiatus. We're going on vacation. The tropics are going to shut their doors temporarily for about a week and a half, 2 weeks, and I want you to check back with me around July 15th, July 16th, maybe sometime around the middle of the month as we turn towards the back end of July 2024, because that is when I do think we're going to see the next signal or two of our upcoming tropical features out there over the Atlantic MDR, probably coming off of Africa and headed in that fateful westward direction. Here's the current water vapor shot, and as I said on the National Hurricane Center homepage, Beryl is looking a bit more impressive this morning. We still have copious amounts of dry air working in along the south and eastern sides of this system. That's why the low pressure itself hasn't entirely closed off, but we're starting to see greater feeder banding along its entirety, pretty much the circumference of this system or the diameter of the system, especially on the southern side. Yesterday, this quadrant was particularly flaring up on the northwest side, and the low center itself, especially that low-level circulation, was 100% exposed. We're starting to get a little bit of that thunderstorm and moisture to fill in the mid and low-level circulation. If you haven't been watching my updates recently, I always try to remind you guys, these systems like to be vertically stacked, and as of yesterday, and especially immediately following its tenure over the Yucatan Peninsula, we lost that barotropic vertical stack. It was kind of all toppled over. It had fallen over like a stack of Jenga, if you will, and that's why we're slowly but surely beginning to recoup as we get closer to the Texas Gulf coastline. Take you in for a closer look. You can see that some of these feeder bands along the north side pushing in towards Galveston, Houston area, so you guys are likely going to see some thunderstorm activity here very soon, even immediately after following this video, if you're watching from that local area. If you kind of trace the cloud cover here and you look at the greatest area of cyclonic spin, that low-level circulation where the eye would be present in a very healthy tropical cyclone is somewhere down in through here. So unfortunately for Beryl's sake, we have a lot of that dry air still inundating the east and northeast side of the system. This quadrant here, this pocket of pretty much cloudless atmosphere, cloudless air, indicates that presence of the dry air still being fed into the system, and I do think the dry air is trying to enhance this activity here that's pushing immediately towards the west, towards Brownsville and Corpus Christi. So our greatest area of convection is now off to the west and the immediate southwest of our center, but we're still seeing signs of further organization, so I'm in full agreement with what the National Hurricane Center has for us in terms of the intensity forecast, seeing maybe a low-end Category 1 to a mid-grade Category 1 system approaching the coast somewhere in through here. This is where I'm thinking we're going to see landfall. This system is going to be caught up and hooked by our upper trough that's continuing to dig across the central and southern plains. It's going to get pulled into the northeast of Corpus Christi, somewhere near Port Lavaca, I believe, is what we're looking at, somewhere in that immediate vicinity, and southwest of Galveston and further interior Houston area. Giving you a quick glance at our super ensemble, and if you guys are not familiar with the super ensemble, essentially all this is a conglomeration, a fine mixture of our European, our GFS, our UK, and our Canadian ensemble product. That's why we have a ton of different spaghetti plots, but the key takeaway here is, guys, if you look at the colored lines, these are going to be your ensemble computer control members, your most likely outcome according to all of the ensemble members for that particular model. If you look in the right-hand corner, we have that key, the red being the Euro, the green being the GFS, and so on and so forth. You can see all of our ensemble control members and the ensemble plots themselves, the individual members, are in extreme agreement, and we finally converged on a pretty particular landfall spot just to the southwest of Galveston, Houston, which is what we've been bullseyeing on the channel. It's great to see the forecast verifying. The tricky part, in my opinion, is going to be the intensity, how much of that dry air will mix out as we go through the day today. Our hurricane models, HAPS A and B, are indicating we will see some intensification. The HWRF is thinking we can dip in to Category 1, Category 2 threshold, approaching Category 2 intensity, I should say, on our final approach. We have about 8 to 12 hours left over water before that Texas land interaction begins to derail any sort of strengthening that Beryl tries to undergo. Here's a look at our ships guidance. So the ships is going to be a separate model platform or a separate piece of model data that is more or less in line with the GFS. It does borrow some key tidbits from the GFS model, the global forecast system, and the ships model has actually gone for a far more conservative approach. For the last couple of days, I've been seeing Category 1 approaching Category 2, if not making that Category 2 intensity before making landfall just to the northeast of Corpus Christi, if you look at that map in the lower left-hand corner. But now if you look at the forecasted track, this is generated by the ships model. This is not National Hurricane Center, and you can see we're expecting Tropical Storm Beryl to make its way all the way inland and become nothing more than a remnant low before ever actually achieving hurricane status again. And I can see this happening. I want to give it that vote of confidence because all of our other deterministic and high-resolution hurricane models do anticipate we will see the mixing out of that dry air. And essentially what that means is the relative moisture within the core of the system is going to go up as we see more daytime thunderstorm activity in close proximity to the center itself, that low-level circulation stacking up in the atmosphere, and that should allow that dry air to be pushed out or bullied out of the system and give it that symmetrical look as it begins to get into that strengthening phase. I love to show the steering currents. I'm not going to show you guys the upper level analysis right now because we are just about locked in. We've been watching the progression in the intensity or amplitude, I should say, of this long wave trough feature that extends out of the Dakotas, Minnesota, all the way down to the northern central periphery of Texas, and this is exactly what's kind of given us that bait and switch with Tropical Storm Beryl's forward progression for the longest time, and it took a lot of other individuals to get on board with this trough, pulling it in. At first, the models were not sold at all that this system would first of all be strong enough to feel the influence of that trough, so we were thinking as it cut through the Caribbean, impacted our unfortunate islands out there who I hope are undergoing the recovery process in the wake of Tropical Storm Beryl and the lack of any upcoming tropical activity. We were thinking it was going to crash into the Yucatan and eventually become another Mexico storm or Gulf Coast Mexico storm like we saw with Tropical Storm Chris, our short-lived sea letter storm that came and went very quickly a couple of weeks ago, and then Tropical Storm Alberto, which officially kicked off our 2024 Atlantic season, also being a Bay of Campeche, eastern Mexico landfall. You can see we still have our dominant Atlantic high, and the only reason I bring that up is because we do have this western extension over Florida, which has been producing very, very hot conditions for us here in Florida and up the East Coast. I know the Carolinas have been mentioning it's been hot and dry. Georgia, Alabama, much of the same. We've had heat advisories in place for us here in Central Florida for the last couple of days now. So truthfully, it's a give and take with the weather. We're not seeing Tropical Storm Beryl coming our way, but we are suffering in triple-digit heat indexes, 100% relative humidity throughout the day, giving us that feels like temperature of 105, 110 degrees as we go day to day. So please make sure you're taking the necessary precautions here in the southeast to avoid any sort of heat fatigue or heat exhaustion if you're out and about during the day, especially as we get ready to round out this 4th of July weekend. But there you have it, guys. Like I've been mentioning on my live streams, you can see the winds coming out of the northwest with our trough and diverging down towards the south through Mexico. The western extent of our ridge here begins to create a bit more of divergent flow just out ahead of the system, and then if you follow the progression of the trough or the streamlines highlighting the flow directly associated with our long wave trough, there's that other quadrant of diffluence or divergent flow that begins to move from the southwest towards the east-northeast through the Appalachians, the Ohio, Mississippi valleys, and we're left with this neutral point in the winds. And that's what I've been more or less using to forecast the forward progress of this system. We're looking at 500 to 850 millibar deep layer winds here, so features that are stacking from 850 to 500 and the layers in between that portion of the atmosphere. And if you look real close, you can see that that's exactly where we're going to see this system track, and I really don't foresee any big adjustments to landfall site or forward progress over the next 6 to 12 hours. If you look at our forecasted 250 millibar heights, you can see where we have our strong winds associated with the trough digging in over the Central Plains, the Four Corners states of Colorado, New Mexico, the Texas Panhandle, the Oklahoma Panhandle, I almost said Florida there for a second, digging in across the Southern Plains, headed through the Texarkanas. Then you have some of that rotation around our anticyclone. It's off the chart here. It's off to the right-hand side. But this area of southerly or southeasterly to southerly and then eventually southwesterly winds indicates the presence of our ridge that's situated over Florida and the rest of the southeast states. And if you look how the winds begin to weaken in this general spot, path of least resistance, the key takeaway with a lot of your tropical forecasting or any weather forecasting for that matter, this system here, Beryl, indicated by our 994 millibar low stamp, is going to take that path of least resistance and move on in. The question is, how strong will it get as our trough begins to pick it up and kick it towards the north? We're going to increase our forward speed before it's all gone and washed out as a member of this long wave trough altogether. Here's a look at our European model. This is going to be our 700 millibar heights, and you can see the southerly wind flow turning into a southwesterly component over the Gulf Coast states of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. All this extra vorticity, the pockets of red, yellow, and orange indicating the presence of a frontal system, and our upper trough that's coming in. And once again, going from the GFS to the Euro, you can see where our path of least resistance is right in through there, which is why I am anticipating a landfall between Galveston and Corpus Christi. Somewhere in that general ballpark is where this system is going to come ashore, and if I fast forward the loop, you can see it's going to get picked up right in between that path of least resistance, exactly where I've drawn my pink arrows or pink lines, and get pulled up and become nothing more than a rainmaker as it moves up into parts of Missouri, Iowa, areas of Illinois, Indiana, becoming a hefty rainmaker and a possible thunderstorm producer for the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. Coming on over to the HAFS model, so we're going to look at just HAFS A because the rest of our hurricane models, the B and the H-WRF and the H-MON, are all pretty much singing in unison. We're looking at about the same level of intensity and the same general track, so I'm going to save you guys time and show you just the HAFS A. You can see right about as we approach landfall time between midnight and 2 a.m., if you look at the timestamp up here towards the right-hand corner, is when this system is going to be knocking on the door of the Texas Gulf coastline with lots of good thunderstorm activity. We want to watch this right front quadrant, particularly for areas of Houston, Galveston. This is not going to be a Harvey. I've unfortunately been seeing that comparison being drawn across social media. This is not going to be a Harvey, ladies and gentlemen. You can rest assured. Harvey was a disaster. I wrote a paper on it for my hydrology course previous semester in school, and I did a lot of careful research on that storm, and I can safely and 110% confidently tell you guys this is not a Hurricane Harvey. You will see some flooding. You're going to see some tropical impacts. You're going to see some gusty winds and some tornado activity along the right side, the northeast side of the system, but we are not looking at a disaster of the extent that we saw with Hurricane Harvey. Two very different systems, two very different steering patterns, two very different phenomena that are expected to unfold as this system moves ashore. So key takeaway here is, guys, again, landfall site is just about locked in. We don't really have to worry about pinpointing where it is it's going to come ashore. The intensity is going to be what's interesting to watch evolve as we go through the day today. Looking at a 980 millibar central pressure here, according to the HAFS A, Tuesday at 6Z or 2 a.m. Monday morning, which would be Category 1 trying to make a run for Category 2 intensity as it gets ready to come on shore, which is what the Hurricane Center is thinking. Maybe just a little bit of further intensification right as it crosses the threshold from water to sea or sea to land. Sorry about that. From going from sea to land and moving inland. But again, look at the east side of this system. This is going to be my primary concern. We're going to see some interior or further inland flooding, coastal storm surge, especially if you guys remember what happened with Tropical Storm Alberto much further to the south. But this tornado threat and these convective pockets here, look at the bean shape, that teardrop shape in a lot of these systems here. Individual thunderstorms pushing ashore. So I think Houston, Beaumont, even the western edge of Louisiana are going to have to really watch for not only that localized heavy rainfall threat, but the tornado threat. Here's a look at our rainfall. I'm showing you the 24-hour rainfall rate because I don't like to show you the full total accumulation for 100, 200 hours. I feel like that's a little misleading. Anybody can take a total precip model and show you guys, yep, after 200 hours, especially if you're seeing consistent showers or thunderstorms during the day, anybody can stretch a model out to 200 hours and show you, yep, we're going to get 10 inches of rain. But yeah, please provide some context. 10 inches of rain over how many days? 8 to 10 to 12 days? Well, that makes sense. In this case, we are going to see some pretty gratuitous rainfall totals piling up over a 24-hour window. If you see 36 hours from now, as we're getting into Monday night, Tuesday morning, within 24 hours, we could see anywhere between 4 to 5 inches of rain, with the general average being 2 to 4 inches over a 12 to 18-hour period, right up through eastern Texas, almost the entirety of eastern Texas. If you draw a straight longitudinal line, eastern Texas is going to see a lot of rainfall action with this system, and then it's finally going to be pumped and pushed out by that trough, grabbed by the frontal system, supported by the trough, and we're left over with just remnant moisture pockets that are going to allow us to start that recovery process. So again, not a Harvey, ladies and gentlemen. This is 72 hours after the landfall and the movement of the system, and you can see we are all clear. We are good to go. The heavy rainfall is only going to last for about a 24-hour window, maybe 30 to 34 hours max, and then it'll finally begin to clear out. We are not going to have this system simply spinning and marinating over your area. There will likely be a flood threat. National Hurricane Center and WPC Weather Prediction Center are predicting the maximum extent of our rainfall accumulation could hit 6 to 8 inches, with localized, very localized pockets of something stronger or heavier than that, higher than that total accumulation, just because of the intensity of our embedded thunderstorms, the feeder bands adding to or supplementing those values. But again, it's not a major cataclysmic flood event we're looking at here. So if anybody's trying to strike that comparison to you and tell you that this is something you really need to be worried about or freak you out, please don't pay them any mind. This is not going to be a Harvey. Then last but not least, I'm just going to hold the timestamp here. This is on the 13 Zulu mark. This is 9 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. This is going to be our HRRR on the right and our RRFs, our RFS on the left, and we're looking at our SIG torn parameter. And if you look for much of southwest and western Louisiana, and especially up towards Galveston, Houston, the eastern half, the eastern border of Texas, we're going to have to watch for that tornado threat with those feeder bands rotating in off the warmer Gulf waters, interacting with the land, and also having that confluent or that convergent wind flow along the right front quadrant of our system as it comes through the dirty side, as we like to put it, in tropical analysis. So I do think that we're going to have an extended period of time of a tornado threat as that system works in. You can see our STP parameters are in full agreement. They are pretty much a mirror image of one another, regardless of which model you look at, that there is going to be that preliminary tornado threat as this system moves in, finally beginning to dissipate as we go through the early morning hours of Tuesday. Could see some residual background thunderstorms that could produce a stray funnel or two, but regardless, the key point that we need to be watching for is as this system comes ashore very early Monday, the nocturnal threat is going to be there for tornadoes and heavy rainfall, but particularly the nocturnal tornado threat you need to watch for as this system pushes in. It's going to be that northeast side. So if you track this system on satellite and radar and you see you reside to the northeast, the north and east of this system, as you go towards sunset tonight and into very early Monday morning, maintain your situational awareness because tornadoes are likely going to be an increasing threat. But that's all we got for you here in the Weather Center today. Thank you very much for tuning in today. If you managed to watch to the end point of this video, I hope this definitely found you in a good state and helped to mentally prepare you for what's to come with Tropical Storm potential Hurricane Beryl. The intensity is still a little up in the air, but we are locked in terms of our threats, where this thing is going to track, and how long it is going to maintain itself or move through your local area. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave me a comment in the comments section of this video. I am happily able to answer you. Or if you'd like to drop me a line on my other social media platforms, WX Center Nazar Nazario on Instagram, TikTok, and X. Definitely helpful, and I definitely want to get back to you and answer any questions or concerns that you have, so don't hesitate to open up a line of communication with me. Please consider hitting that subscribe button. I'm thankful for all of you guys for helping to build this community. It's been a great ride, especially given that we're only into the early pieces of the hurricane season. A lot more to come, so please consider hitting subscribe, nudging that like button to get this information out there, sharing it with folks you think would benefit from this type of information, and making sure your notifications are turned on so you don't miss any of the numerous updates that are coming out, because I do think, even though the middle portions of July are going to be quiet, we're going to see the tropics wake back up and open their doors once again as we get towards the last week or so of this month, and especially in August. We'll see you guys again very soon. Thank you for watching. This is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.